Come here. I got a treat for you. Yes, I do. Watch this here. You get to choose. What would you like the best? An apple or an orange? Which one would you like? Pretty hard to pick, isn't it? Want that one? Okay, the apple is yours. I didn't think you'd like the orange. Well, you're not exactly chowing down on that apple either. Well, it's to eat, not to scratch. I think you probably want a hamburger. That's what you want, isn't it? Apples and oranges. Boy, I get accused a lot of comparing apples and oranges. Anytime I do a cartridge comparison that's a little bit off, that's the accusation. I don't agree with it, but here's the idea. If I compare cartridges with different calibers, like a 7mm to a 26 caliber, or a 30 to a 28, apples to oranges doesn't count, okay? If I compare a long action cartridge to a short action, apples to oranges, it doesn't count. It's just not fair. So if I compare a fat cartridge to a skinny cartridge, if everything has to be the same. So I don't think that's valid, because I think what these folks are confusing is comparing cartridges to equating them. I'm not saying that they're equal. I'm just comparing the differences because I think that's valid. However, I am going to kowtow to some of the complaints and try to be as fair as I can. So what we have here are a bunch of 6.5mm cartridges. They all shoot .264 inch in diameter bullets, 26 calibers, right? Okay. So to be fair, we can't have this Grendel because he's just too short. Look at how tiny that little guy is. That cartridge came out in around 2003, I believe, and it's obviously designed for really short action rifles, AR-15s, I think is what drove it. But since it's so short, we're going to have to set it aside. The next is, that's the old 6.5 Swede, 6.5 by 55 Swede, the first 6.5mm cartridge in the world. And this was designed way back in 1891. And it's been taking caribou and moose and bears and deer and you name it for a long time. Quite popular in Europe. However, even though it has ballistics real similar to the Creedmoor and the 260 Remington, we can't compare because it's a little bit too long to fit into a short action. It's about 3 inches, maybe 3.1 inches maximum cartridge overall length. Too long, gotta go. Now, here's our pet, the 6.5 Creedmoor everybody loves. That one qualifies because it's a true short action, 2.825 inches total length. That's as long as it can be, and it'll fit into those short actions okay. Stay in the game, buddy. 260 Remington, right there beside it. This is a true short action. Based off of the 308 Winchester, it is 2.8 inches total length, cartridge overall length. That will fit into the short actions. Now, an aside, what is a short action? There's really no hard and defined term. It started with the 308 Winchester cartridge with the overall length of 2.8 inches. So that sort of set the benchmark, but the rifle manufacturers don't necessarily make all their short actions the same dimensions. One can be a little longer than the other. And what's really critical are the magazine lengths. Inside that magazine, if it's not long enough, it's not going to fit. So the Remington short action is a 2.8 inch magazine length. And that Swede won't fit in mine. But these guys will. So there's kind of the shortest of the short actions. Now, Winchester Model 70s have a 3-inch, generally, a 3-inch magazine on their short action. So you can fit the bigger cartridges in there. Does that qualify as a short action or not? And you go down the line of other brands and you're going to find out that it varies considerably. But just for argument's sake, we're going to stick with 2.8 inches as our short action overall length. So that brings up a problem for this little guy. It's the 6.5 by 284 Norma. Now, this started out as a 284 Winchester case way back in the 1960s, about 1966. And maybe it was 64. But the idea was to have a 7mm that would perform about like a 270 Winchester. So it's a short, fat cartridge, a little bit fatter in diameter. So that probably won't qualify here. Apples to oranges, it's too fat. Plus, it's just a little bit too long at about 3.1 inches total. Gotta go, buddy. Nice shopping with you. That brings up the new popular one. Just came out in 2018, the 6.5 PRC. And that is supposed to be the big brother of the Creedmoor because it's got more powder capacity. Uh-oh, how did it get that? Well, let's see. It looks like it's a short action, but actually it's a little bit too long. This guy also comes in at 3 inches, maybe 3.1. That's not going to qualify under the 2.8. So do we throw it out? I hate to do it, folks, but we probably need to throw out that 6.5 PRC. I can't believe it. Well, what does that leave us? Well, here's something no one ever talks about anymore. This is a 2.8 inch total length cartridge that's 6.5, and it's an old one. 1966 Remington came out with this guy. It's a 6.5 Remington Magnum. Pretty cool. They were making short magnums way back in the 1960s, but it's based on that fat darn cartridge. It's a belted Magnum. It's basically that 375 H&H shortened down. I mean, really shortened down. But it's got that belt, and a lot of guys say that's not fair. You can't be comparing belted cases. Besides, belts are nasty anyway. Okay. Well, there's an obvious loser right there. I mean, the 26 Nosler, that's based on the 404 Jeffrey case. That thing's so fat it almost needs Weight Watchers. But boy, does that drive a 26 caliber bullet fast. But see how long that is? That's a 30-06 length right there, and that is a standard length action. Some people call it the long action. Not fair to compare long actions to shorts. So there we go, folks. There's the true competition of apples to apples. What do we have here? A Fuji, a Gala, a Red Delicious? Ooh, I don't know. Well, we could find out by doing some ballistics, of course. So the deal with this is that the 308 case was the apparent for the 260. All they did was neck it down to 26 caliber. With the Hornady 6.5, that Hornady was a cool idea because they thought they would maximize the potential for a light recoiling cartridge that doesn't burn out barrels and does everything that long-range target shooters wanted. And they know that you've got to have those high BC bullets for this long-range target competition. So in 2007, when they designed this, I think they probably looked at that 26, the 260 Remington, and said, how can we make that just a little bit better for the long-range target shooters? They're going to have high volume shooting. Well, let's see. We'll make the shoulder a little bit sharper, so they went with a 30-degree shoulder. And then we'll have a nice long neck so that the bullet does not project down past the neck-shoulder junction into the powder space. And then you don't have to worry about those donuts that sometimes build up around there as you reload. So they had hand loaders in mind when they were working up that thing. And really, that's about the only difference between it and the 260, other than that they said, you know what, this is going to be set up for a twist rate of 1 in 8 inches. One complete turn for every 8 inches of travel. Now, a lot of the 260s are made the same way, but they can also make a 1 in 9 twist on the 260. That was sort of the standard, although there's no hard and fast rule on this stuff. But all that stuff that they did for the Creedmoor made it really popular. And I don't think it hurt that it was a new cartridge. Even though we had so many other 6.5s out there that could do pretty much what this one does, none of them had the pizzazz of that brand new 6.5 Creedmoor. And it just really took off. Nothing wrong with it. Great little cartridge, but there's your fair and fair comparison. Now we're going to look at some ballistic numbers, but when we do, I would like to bring in the big bad belted guy again, because that is largely overlooked. I don't quite know why, other than the belt, and I don't have any problems with belt. Everybody says, well, the belt is unnecessary because you don't headspace on that. If you're smart, you headspace up here on the shoulder like all the modern cartridges do. And as a hand loader, you can do that. You don't have to make it headspace on that belt. But then they'll say, well, the belt gets in the way and the magazine and it doesn't feed very well. Once again, I have never had problems of feeding with any of the belted magnums. The 375 H&H case, and that's considered like the ultimate all-around do-everything cartridge around the world. Nobody has much bad to say about it, and that's the original belted case. They use it for dangerous game in Africa, and if you ever wanted a reliable feed, that's where you want it. So I just throw that one out the window. If you don't like them, you're a businessman. You don't have to have it, but I think it's worth comparing. Now, it's fatter, right? Of course, if you want more powder volume to drive your bullet faster, you want more energy downrange, you want a flatter trajectory, you've got to have velocity, and the only way you're going to get it is to have more powder and higher pressures. Speaking of pressures, the 6.5 Creedmoor, I think, is rated at 63,000 PSI. And the 260 is only at about 60,000 or maybe 61. Now, these aren't absolute either because Europe has their standard agency for setting these things, and they actually give it a little bit more. I think both of them get about 1,000 more PSI of internal pressure. So hand loaders will play around and who knows what they're ending up with. But when you hear about guys that get 2,800 feet per second out of a Creedmoor pushing 142, 143 grain bullet, they're probably pushing that energy level a little too far and they're getting a little too much pressure. But they claim it's still safe in their guns and they do it, and suddenly you got guys saying, well, I get 2,900 feet per second out of my Creedmoor, so what are you talking about? Well, you're talking about potential problems, and I'm not going to help with any of that. I'm sticking with numbers that come out of the hand loading manuals, which is always the prudent thing to do. So I'm taking my numbers mostly out of the Nosler, I think it's Reloading Manual 8, and they tend to give the 260 a little more oomph than the 6.5 Creedmoor, whereas if you check the Hornady loading manual, they put the Creedmoor ahead of the 260. So I think they're playing some games here because they're competing. I don't know that Nosler necessarily wants to prove that the 6.5 Creedmoor is as good as or better than the 260 or vice versa, but it definitely looks like Hornady has given this guy the benefit of the doubt in its data because it always mudges it up there a little bit more than the Noslers and the other reloading manuals do. But they also use some blended powders over there at Hornady, the Superformance loads. They can get more velocity out of the same volume and capacity, so you might want to consider that. But all those numbers are slightly variable. Don't think that you're locked in. Even bullet BC numbers are a little bit variable. Depends on the rifle that shoots them, how the rifling scours that bullet and creates more drag, and also the velocities. Bullets that slow down tend to have a lower BC. At higher velocities, they have a higher BC. You'll find a lot of that information and data in the Sierra hand loading manual. You might want to check that out too. So we need to run some ballistics, get some tables and some numbers so we can compare these three. And I think while we do it, we might, well, the Swede's just right in there, so let's leave him out. But that PRC, I think, needs to join the club. Close enough to a short action. They're fitting in my Model 70 short action rifle. So I think we're going to consider that as well. And then we've got the 6.5, all shooting the same weight bullet. So this is where we're going to have our apples to apples. We're shooting the same bullet. It's going to be a 142 grain Nosler AccuBond long range. Real similar ballistics coefficients to the 143 grain ELDX from Hornady. Probably real similar to some of the Burger bullets. So a lot of those 6.5s that are really pushing that envelope and stabilizing in 1 and 8-inch twists are going to qualify. So we'll stick with that same bullet, the 142 AccuBond long range, and we're going to go with the maximum velocities in that Nosler manual. And I'm going to give the 6.5 Creedmoor a little bit of a boost. I usually get 2,700 feet per second out of factory ammunition. That's kind of the average all the time. But the hand loading manuals will sometimes nudge it up to 2,750. Hornady certainly does, so that's what we're going to give it. Then we're going to follow the rest of the numbers from the manual, and we're going to see how these guys compare. Apples to apples. Okay, here are the numbers, guys. We are going to compare 6.5 short action apples. And the parameters are we're shooting the 142 grain AccuBond long range bullet. The ballistics coefficient is estimated to be 0.625. That's pretty high. We're going to fire everything from an 8-pound rifle with a 24-inch barrel to sort of level things out. Of course, you can always pick up a little more velocity if you want to go with a longer barrel. We're zeroing everyone for the maximum point blank range. That's right there. Maximum point blank range on an 8-inch diameter target. And that means our bullet will at no point in its trajectory rise more than 4 inches above point of aim, nor drop below 4 inches point of aim. When it does drop below, you've reached your maximum point blank range. It's an old-fashioned zeroing system that really works quite well for hunting because it's quick. You don't have to dial, you don't have to look at any numbers and charts. You just make an estimate that target is within maximum point blank range of your bullet. You can hold dead on and hit the vitals. You'll hit that 8-inch diameter. It's really pretty nifty. And you can always add on long range dialing, reticle selection, and all the rest of it afterward. But it's just nice to know that your bullet is going to stay within that 8-inch diameter if you aim for the dead center. And then we're going to throw in a 10-mile-an-hour right angle wind and see what we can come up with. Now, I've thrown a few more of our cartridges in here besides the 6.5 Creedmoor and the 260 Remington. So if that bothers you, just ignore the rest of these. But I thought it would be fun to make these comparisons. So first of all, cartridge overall length, and you can see that. Really, the 260 Remington is the only one that's an actual. Well, I take it back, the 6.5 Rem Mag. Those are both designed to exactly fit the original short-action magazine box of the Model 700s. So you've got your links, and you can see these guys are a little bit long, but they will fit into like my Model 70. I've got a Model 70 set up for the 6.5 PRC, and it fits just fine. I've got a Norma set up for another bolt action. It fits just fine. So, and you can always put these into longer actions. You know, some people will complain, well, what's the sense of having a short action if it's not actually a short action? Well, I don't know, but suit yourselves. But I don't have any trouble running a 3-inch cartridge instead of a 2.8-inch cartridge. So water capacity is always kind of fun. You can see we're just steadily going up in capacity. That represents the water capacity with the bullet already seated, so you're not getting any water up in the neck. So essentially, you're looking at your powder capacity. And as you go up, you're obviously going to have more powder. You ought to be able to get more recoil, but you've got these maximum pressures. And these are sort of standardized by SAMI in the US and CPI, I think it's called, the organization that handles that stuff in Europe. But as I mentioned earlier, the Europeans will sometimes give it another 1,000 PSI or even 2. So I think they give the 260 Remington 62,000 over there. And the Creedmoor, they might even give 63,000. But you're right in the ballpark at any rate. Here's where you're really suffering. Those older cartridges, they just didn't design the rifles to withstand those kinds of pressures. So if you're shooting an old military Mauser or something that someone has rehabilitated, you don't want to be blowing anything up, so they keep those pressures down on the factory ammo. However, if you have a fully modern rifle chambered for that suite and you're a hand loader, you can push those up because the brass can certainly take it. 58 on the Norma. I don't know why they went with that, but the 284 brass is plenty strong enough. So, and so are the rifles. So I'm not quite sure why they went so low on that one, but most people consider the Norma and the PRC to develop almost identical ballistics. You might get 30 feet per second more out of the PRC, but boy, they are really close. So I would imagine hand loaders are cranking that guy right up. And then the 6.5 Rem Mag, and they started right off in the 60s at 65,000 PSI on that one. So there you're going to get your velocities a lot higher. And we're going to see that in the next part of our chart. So down here, we've got our muzzle velocity, and I gave that Creedmoor a little bit more than I think it deserves, but a lot of people will easily get that velocity hand loading. And sometimes you'll get a factory load that hits it. 260 Remington, you can usually figure 50 to 100 feet per second more velocity out of the 260, especially if you're a hand loader, comfortably, just because it has the bigger water capacity. You got about a grain more. So the PRC, obviously you've got quite a bit more powder volume and you're pushing it up to 2950. So you figure the 6.5 PRC is going to give you about 200 to 250 feet per second more velocity with just about any bullet over that Creedmoor. And that's kind of what it's hanging its hat on. But the ignored 6.5 Rem mag is the champion of them all here. Look at that, 3,059. You're just really beating out everybody, and you've still got that short action case. That 6.5 Rem is a little bit shorter than the PRC, and still you're getting a little more. So if you can live with the belt, man. But look at your maximum point blank range and the zero to get it. If you zero this Creedmoor at 265 yards, its maximum point blank range is 313. So you could hold dead center on a whitetail's chest or a mule deer or a pronghorn. And as long as he was within 313 yards, you're going to hit him within that 8-inch vital zone. Pretty nice. And look at how you just ramp it up. The more velocity you get, the farther your maximum point blank range. We're out to 322 with a 260, 334 with a 6.5 PRC, and all the way to 346 yards with that Rem mag. That is pretty nifty. Of course, you pay the price with a little bit more recoil every time. Step it right up. And then there's your drops and drifts. I just did a 300 yard and a 600 to give you a general idea. But here's kind of the big number. The drops, yeah, minimal. But look at the energy that's remaining. You're pushing up over 1,500. And for a lot of people, that spells elk. And certainly any of them are good enough for deer. I wouldn't have any problem taking any animals with that. But if you're really an energy freak and you want to keep that energy up above 1,500 for your terminal energy, good old Rem mag's going to do it. PRC comes close. But study those charts, and there's your apples to apples, or maybe kind of a hybrid apple with a little bit of orange in it on those longer ones. But those are all the compromises we have to consider when we're looking at art cartridges, and I think they're valid comparisons across the block, because what we're really looking for are the ballistics that we think we need and the terminal performance that we think we need. And I'm not too fussy about whether that comes in a long action or a fat case or a short one or a steep shoulder or a shallow shoulder. And if it works, it works. You can consider those other things later. Covey's reminding me it's time to go play again. She's always thinking it's time to play. So I'm going to sign off for now. Well, that's my apples to apples, not oranges, comparison of some 6.5 cartridges. I want to thank you for watching this. I invite you to subscribe to our channel. You can join us on Patreon, get the Patreon app, and you can be a contributing member of the Ron Spomer Outdoors community. We'd love to have you. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Ron Spomer Outdoors. And we've got podcasts now, Ron Spomer Outdoors, on most podcatchers. So join us if you can. In the meantime, I invite everybody to hunt honest and shoot straight, and stay tuned for my next episode when I'm going to compare apples to pineapples. Hey, they're both apples.